So, Death Stranding, huh? This fucking game. Well, I've been playing for about 6 hours, maybe. And if you've been seeing some of the reviews and stuff, you'll hear that it starts off very interesting, and then, like, after the first few hours, it turns into a series of meaningless fetch quests and just goes to shit. And if that's what you heard, I would say I'm definitely in that shitty part of the game right now. Um, I'm still very, very early in the game, but I'm definitely, I would say, probably, and maybe not. Maybe it gets way worse, but I mean, I don't know how it could get any more fetchy and quote unquote meaningless than this. Um, However, it might surprise you because despite saying that, the game has been great so far. Um, there's a lot to talk about with this game, and I'm going to try to confine myself to just the gameplay and the kind of design philosophy behind the game, because if I go into the story and the like life philosophy stuff that this game has, I could be here for 2 hours, and also I haven't beaten the game yet. I'm still very early on, so it's kind of improper to critique the story with this little of it in my head. But I definitely seen a lot of themes and subtext that I can talk on, but I'll save that for once I beat the game. But as far as gameplay is concerned, uh, let me just say this is not the kind of game that you can watch and expect to understand what it's like to play it. And I think Kojima Sama did that on purpose. Now I am not a Kojima drone. I like Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. I liked 5. I never played 4. I do think Kojima is a hack in many ways. I agree with that assessment of him in some ways. Um, but honestly, after having played this, I respect him a lot more than I did before, because he's known, right, as the movie guy, right? He's known as the guy who doesn't make games. He makes movies with some game parts to them. And I think this game is a statement to all of his haters, honestly, I really do, that he is capable of making a basically purely gameplay driven game. Now, I know that sounds weird. Wait, what do you mean purely gameplay driven? Isn't this game all about the story? It doesn't have like 70 hours of cinematics? And apparently it does. Apparently the ending sequence is like a half an hour long or something. It's really long. And in the beginning, the first few hours of the game, where people are getting misled into thinking this is going to be like Metal Gear Solid, it is a ton of cinematics, and it's a ton of shitty, terrible Japanese, ridiculous, horrible cinematics. That's being too harsh, because they are shot extremely well, beautiful looking game, and it's so weird and alien and exotic and abstract and nihilistic that it can actually be kind of fascinating to kind of try to put the pieces together, because there is some kind of coherent lore here. And the game very heavily plays off of ignorance and vagueness to kind of get you fascinated in what's going on. And as it starts to reveal itself, it does kind of disappoint. Like once the phantom enemies are revealed to just kind of be, phantom people, that's kind of disappointing, because the way that it seemed like they were monsters, and they are monsters, but it was interesting to think of a monster with human hands, but it's just they're just people made out of fucking shadow, which is boring and trite. Um, but it's really not that big of a deal. The story, while it's very interesting and weird, is, as I said, it doesn't seem to be the main point of this game. I think this game is one big troll, one big shit post by Kojima. He's got the Monster energy drink product placement. He's just showing off. He's got Guillermo del Toro in this. I mean, he's Conan O'Brien. He's just showing off. He's saying, "Hey, all you fuckers out there who tell me I'm a hack, I got all this money, and I got celebrities in my games, and here is, I mean, so far, I gotta say, quite possibly one of the most innovative, or at the very least, maybe not innovative, because maybe I just haven't played the games he's ripping off, but it's innovative to me. I've never played anything like this. It's such a unique game, and it is a game. It's not a movie, and it's not a movie game. Like I said, it's the opposite of a movie game. It's kind of his inversion of this image of people have had of him, of being incapable of making games and only capable and interested in making movies. And I mean, he even released, there was some kind of statement or it was a quote in an interview, or he said that he's planning on making movies in the future. Which I would be very disappointed if he stopped making games after this. This is the thing. If you haven't played this game, you have no idea what I'm talking about. All you're seeing are video clips of some dude walking around. And that's why this game is like literal genius on so many levels. He's showing you that, like, video games are not movies. You can't watch a game and get the same experience that you can get out of playing a game. And he's proving that he knows how to make games. I did get the vibe that it was a movie game, because it felt very much like you were directing a film. Because it's like you're not shooting anything. You know, there are supposedly weapons in this game. And that's also a troll. Everything about this game is done on purpose. You're told constantly about weapons. You know, if you want to repair your weapons free, weapons locked, that kind of, you hear these weird like HUD elements that tell you about weapons, but you don't see any goddamn weapons anywhere. I'm at like hour 6 or 7 now. I haven't seen a fucking weapon once. But they're telling you all about all these weapons. They're deliberately doing it to fuck with you. They're trying to get you to they're trying to subvert your expectations. It's kind of like this. You could say this is kind of like The Last Jedi in a lot of ways, but it's good. And I know that you don't get it because you haven't played it, and I will go into why this game is so good to play so far. It might turn into this is a very first impressions, 6-7 hours, right? So it might, what has made this so fun so far, it might wear thin after like 20 hours, 30 hours, 40, 50. I heard it's up to like 70 hours, 50 to 70 hour campaign, some shit like that. It might not be able to justify that long of a campaign. We will see. This is very first impressions. But even so, even if this game gets shit after hour 30, which I could see happening depending on how the story goes and what they end up adding to it from a gameplay perspective, it was still worth the price. Because it gave me an extremely interesting at least 10 to 30 hours. And it showed me a different side of gaming, a different kind of game that I've never played before. I mean, they say this is a Stranding game, right? I mean, this is a survival stealth looting game. I mean, that's what this is. It's a survival game probably at its core, because you're trying to collect materials and they degrade and they can be damaged by the elements, and you're trying to avoid enemies and stealth away, and you're trying to, traverse nature with tools like ladders and ropes and stuff. It's got very Breath of the Wild vibes going on at times. I got a very distinctly Breath of the Wild vibe when I first started playing, and I was like kind of bounding over the hills. I got that kind of vibe. And I said to myself, it's almost like they're trying to rip off Breath of the Wild. Not really at all. But it's definitely got that kind of big, bounding, open world feel that Breath of the Wild had. And you got the frickin' ponytail, which is kind of reminiscent of Breath of the Wild. He does have a ponytail in that, right? I think so. I lost my train of thought. There's just so much to talk about in this game. I totally forgot where I started that train of thought from. But anyway, the game. No, I gotta find that thought. I'll be right back. Oh yeah, it did kind of feel like a movie game. because you're not really, I've heard people say there's not really a fail state in this game, and that's kind of true. It's really hard to die, and if you do, you can just resurrect. And cargo, really, it doesn't really matter that much. Honestly, it just gets you this shit called likes, which is like it's just a stat. I don't know if you can spend it on anything. I don't even care. That's the crazy part. I don't even care that likes, for all intents and purposes right now, are meaningless. I still like getting them. This game is it's insane. It like really does. The menus are perfectly crisp. They've got lots of nice sound effects, and they're beautiful. It's like it's got a social media element to it, so it gets you compelled to like play it. It's not, but it's not meaningless. That's the thing. It sounds like, oh, it's mindlessness trying to deceive or manipulate you into playing it and enjoying it, and to deceive you into thinking you like it. No, you are enjoying this experience. People say, oh, it's not about fun. No, it is fun. I've had immense fun playing this game. I just think people are too stupid to understand what fun is. They've never figured out fun. They want to have their hand held, and they don't want to kind of, explore and experiment, which is what this game is a lot about. And I say it's like a movie game because there's not really a lot of combat or fail states, and it's kind of like you're directing a movie, or you're guiding this little, science fiction Frodo Baggins out into Mordor, and it's like you're watching him and you're rooting for him. The animations are great, and he's stumbling around, and he's losing his footing, and he's up against these crazy odds, and you're you're rooting for him to get where the fuck he needs to go, to just offload this absolute meaningless crap, metal or resin bullshit for likes. The most meaningless shit ever. But like, once again, all games are ultimately meaningless. It's about engaging with a system, mastering it, and just achieving goals, and then hopefully along the way being told a semi-interesting story, get some kind of intellectual, conceptual content out of it. And I think this game is doing that shit so far. And it's like, you don't get it because you haven't played it. I still haven't explained why mechanically. I'm still in the conceptual level. I'm still thinking about all the ideas that this game is using. I'm not thinking about what it does to play. It's all about balance and speed and efficient route planning. You're a science fiction courier. You're a post-apocalyptic and or science fiction courier. It kind of blends the sci-fi and the post-apocalypse fantasy shit. It's Earth. You're in the United States, but it feels like you're on fucking Venus or like Mars. It feels like you're on another planet. So you're walking around this like moon, basically. It feels very Mass Effect like. You're walking around this moon, but you're on Earth, because shit's gone such shit that it's unrecognizable. Basically, I think that at first I thought they were just terrible at understanding what the United States looked like from a biome perspective. But now I think it's because of the story, the lore. There's a reason why it looks so weird. Because I thought I was in fucking New Zealand, I mean, it's probably where they got all these photo scans from. I thought I was in New Zealand, but apparently it's the United States. But it's all about balance. You're using the triggers to balance your left and right sides, and you're carrying your cargo and your tools on various parts of your body. You can stack them up on your back really high, and they're like magnetically connected. So you have this absurd image of this little dude with this really tall, a backpack running away from aliens and shit, and jumping over cliffs. But it works. It doesn't look absurd to the point where you don't buy it. You can kind of get how this would work technologically. So it looks alien and strange, but it's still kind of believable. And that's a big theme throughout this game, is it's so weird. You've got a fucking baby on your fucking chest that you use, in the game, and it makes sense within the lore. It's as stupid as the story is, and as retarded as it's just a retarded, it's just a deliberately overly abstract, crappy story with a very weak narrative plot. But it still has an internal logic that you can get, and it creates this hilarious situation where you're looking at an absolutely absurd image. This dude with a giant backpack and a baby on his chest running around like a fucking idiot. But it makes sense within the context of the game. And because of the way the game plays, you're so engaged with it that you're like, yeah, this makes more sense than real life. Like this is the future, which is an accomplishment. The fact that he was able to do this, I think, was a fucking accomplishment. And it's all about, like I said, balance. You're using the triggers to keep your center of gravity centered as you're traversing this uneven ground. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole fucking game. There is stealth. There's patches of acid rain that deteriorate your stuff, that makes you want to move faster through it, obviously, which, you got to be careful with. You're losing your footing. The more cargo you got, the harder it is. And then in these acid rain patches, enemies can show up that you have to stealth away from. Once again, this is very early, so there might be a lot more to this game that I haven't discovered yet, or not. I don't know. There is apparently some form of vehicle in this game, but I haven't gotten the battery for it yet. But the primary thing that you're doing, there's a lot of stealth, and there's a lot of cinematics and story stuff. Not a lot now, but there is a lot of that stuff. But it's the primary thing that you're going to be doing is walking around picking shit up, and then, as you pick up more and more and more shit, you're going to become more and more encumbered, and you're going to become more and more mindful of your movements, and you're deliberate in your movements and slower in your movements. And you have to start planning out routes. You got to look at the topography. Do I want to climb? It's very Breath of the Wild in a sense where you're like looking at the land and you're surveying it and you're figuring out where you want to go. And you can basically go anywhere. I mean, there's probably limitations, but I mean, I was climbing up some pretty sheer faces just by climbing it. So there's a lot of freedom in that way. But all of these elements, the insane, crazy setting, and it's also just like really well presented, very 80s sci-fi aesthetic. I heard there's some plagiarism accusations with this in some Soviet novel. I'll have to check that out. But it's got a very like John Carpenter feeling, like very sci-fi, and it's really good at selling that. It's got like the Thing vibe to it almost, Alien kind of. It's very, very good. I'm really enjoying it. And it makes no sense. Look at the fucking gameplay that I've posted on my channel. It looks ridiculous because you're watching it and you're not playing it. And that's why this game is brilliant. It's Kojima saying, like, I can make a game that plays well, that looks retarded. A complete and total inversion of what everyone says of him. It's still second-handed. He's still doing it to prove a point to other people, not himself. Or maybe he's doing it to prove a point to himself. Who knows? But I'm glad he did it. Whatever fucking immoral reason he had for it, I'm glad he did it because it's a good game. It's a good game. Good game, bro. GG. I mean, it's basically like he took the idea of what is a video game player? What does the video game character do? He's a superhero delivery man, right? I mean, that's what the hero is in most cases. He's delivering something somewhere, right? And he's like a soldier and he's like a badass. Well, that's what he is. That's what Sam Porter, Strand Fisher, whatever the fuck his name is. He's a fucking science fiction delivery man. That's all he is. He just delivers packages. Now, yeah, there's apparently weapons in this game. There's apparently combat at some point, but so far there ain't. And I don't even care. I'm having a lot of fun being the UPS guy. I guess this is gameplay related. It's more abstract, but it's still gameplay related. This game is very much like the myth of Sisyphus. It's just a dude getting just absolutely beat the shit out of by nature and the laws of physics, and picking himself up and pushing onwards, and then completing his goal, and then doing it all over again. It's there seems to be some intellectual depth to this game. Like there definitely is. Not just seem, there is. Kojima might be hackish, but he's not completely dumb. There's some very interesting ideas purely from the gameplay. The story is retarded. The story is absolutely the worst aspect of this game. It's not terrible. But it's not great. And the gameplay is so different and surprisingly engaging. Like, I would never expect this game, based on seeing clips of it, to be this fun to play. And I'm seriously wondering, am I just deluding myself? Am I just trying to convince myself that I didn't waste $65? I don't think that's the case, man. I hate God of War. I hate Red Dead Redemption 2. If I'm so good at hating these games that I paid full price for, why am I really struggling to find any reason to dislike this game? you know? Now, it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you go into it understanding that it's a science fiction UPS game and understanding that there's some kind of weird depth to the controls of the game and the system, the mechanics, the literal mechanics of the game, the gravity and the weight and the balance system and the way all that works together with the terrain and the topography and the just get from A to B kind of mentality and the very high levels of freedom that you have in traversing the world, much like Breath of the Wild, makes a very interesting and fun game. So when people say that fun, it's not really fun or fun isn't the point with this game, I just think you're dumb. I just think you're a dummy who doesn't understand fun, because this is fun. You know, if you're thinking, if you're just looking at a guy walking, it's not fun. But if you're playing it and you get how to play it, which is you're constantly using the triggers. I mean, you're never not pressing the triggers as you're walking across the world, right? You're always either holding the triggers down or adjusting them as you wobble. So you're always doing something as you're moving, and you have to kind of be engaged to keep yourself balanced. And you're always looking for some piece of cargo or some fucking crystal formation or just the next objective. You're always looking for something, and there's always like a hazard or something that you got, some kind of topographical puzzle you got to solve. Okay, I don't want to go through that river. I want to go around this way. I've got a ladder. I don't have a ladder. I can do this. I can't do that. You're kind of making calculations based on what's going on. And, it doesn't really hold your hand. It gives you a basic set of tools and then tells you to go do it, which means you got to kind of use your mind. You do have waypoints and they tell you where to go, but you still got to kind of use your mind with the terrain and the amount of weight that you're carrying. You got to take all this shit into account, and it makes for a surprisingly enjoyable experience. And it's also like a very like deep game, because it's like playing on the tropes of the delivery guy and the Kojima thing where he's just a movie guy and now he's making what seems to be a predominantly gameplay driven game. Metal Gear Solid 5 was entirely gameplay. The story was terrible in Metal Gear Solid 5, worse than any of the other ones, basically non-existent. It was all open world gameplay. I fucking loved Metal Gear Solid 5. It was the shittiest Metal Gear Solid game by far, but I loved it as a game because I was able to just judge it as a game and not as this big, amazing conclusion to the series. That's not what it was. I didn't have that expectation going into it, and I really enjoyed it. This game, I had an expectation going in it. I had the expectation going in that it would be shitty, because everyone was saying it was shitty. Everyone was saying it's a UPS delivery sim. It's a walking sim. It's not it is a walking sim. That's the thing. Once again, it's Kojima fucking with people. It is a walking sim, but it's like a walking sim in hazardous environments in a science fiction post-apocalypse with really heavy, crazy, absurdly large cargo on your back. Now, if you had to simulate that kind of experience, there'd be a lot of stuff going on if you were really trying to simulate what that would be like in real life. And that's what he did. It's a walking simulator, and it's a survival game. Wikipedia says action game. I think, once again, Kojima's trolling. He told all his publishers, call it an action game. It's an action game. It's an action game. The difficulty settings, which they tell you to set in the beginning before you start playing, and they say, if you're familiar with action games, if you're not familiar with action games, they tell you it's an action game on purpose to subvert your expectations, because it's not really an action game. But at the same time, there's a lot of tension. It is kind of a thriller. There is a feeling of fear and tenseness, despite the fact that it's very easy. I'm playing on hard. It's not hard. So it's not but it's not an action game. It's like I would call it an open world survival stealth game so far, with a really crazy story. And it's one of a goddamn kind. My friend who I respect, said that it looks like just a derivative open world bullshit. Yeah, if you're watching it. When you're playing it, it really isn't that. You might still not like it. I'm not expecting everyone to enjoy this because it is weird, and you are watching a dude walk, but you're doing a lot more than that, and you're using your head a lot more than just press. Like you think, oh, you're just pressing the stick forward and then you're just watching it. No, there's a lot of stuff going on in your head as you're walking, and that is like the brilliance of this game. Is that there's so much going on in the mind of the player that the viewer isn't privy to, because he's just watching a guy walk and he doesn't understand what the game's about. And that's why it's brilliant. That he wants people to like say, no, you got to trust it. You got to play it. You can't watch, you got to do it yourself. You can't trust the footage. You got to play it yourself. I think that's one of the things he's going for with this game. That's the distinct, if I can get through that fucking word, the distinct vibe I get from this is a giant $100 million shitpost that somehow managed to be so far the most interesting game I've ever played, possibly, and one of the most fun games I've ever played. I mean, I wouldn't say this is my favorite game, but I mean, it is in the top 30. It's definitely in the top 50. This game is easily in my top 50, just based on these 6 hours or 7 hours. If it goes to shit, I'll revise my opinion. This is all very first impressions, but even if it goes to shit, I still think it's earned all the praise I've given it for all the reasons that I've outlined. So I'm going to finish the game. I'll do a full review, and I'll do the story review and the philosophy and the subtext review, and maybe I'll give my final thoughts on the gameplay. But this has been my first impressions of the gameplay of Death Stranding. Thank you for listening.